Welcome to the podcast, Let the Prophet Speak. This is Saul Weinreb, the host of your podcast, and we are going to complete today the chapter 3 of the second book of Samuel, that's Shmuel Bet, Perek Gimel. We are up to Pasuk Chaf, that is verse 20. We are at the precipice of peace. Avner has secured the agreement of all of the leaders of the tribal leaders of Israel to unite under David. Avner has been spurned by Ishbosheth, the king. He is now coming on a peace mission to Hebron, and we are about to read how suspicion and how old tit-for-tat rivalries will mess up the opportunity for peace. When we hear people talk about sometimes you have to take a risk for peace, peace can only come when one is willing to trust. And trust, in this case, trust the enemy, which is an extremely difficult thing to do. And we are about to read a story where the Torah, where the Navi, the prophet, teaches us this lesson, that in order to achieve peace, sometimes you have to trust your enemy. If one were to paraphrase the famous saying of Ronald Reagan, trust but verify. One could have trusted here and then verified indeed that the leaders of Israel were ready to go along with Avner, but that unfortunately was not the course of action that happened. So let's see how this plays out. Vayavo Avner el David Hebron. Avner came to David in Hebron, v'ito esrim anashim, together with 20 men. Vayash David li Avner v'la'anashim asher ito mishteh. David made them a party. He made them a feast. So he welcomed him nicely, as David had promised. As long as you keep your agreement before and send Michal back and show that you're serious, then I will greet you and I will talk to you, which is what happened. So Avner kept his part of the bargain. Again, David was fulfilled the trust but verify. Once he saw that they were willing to give up Michal, David realized that Avner was for real, and the potential peace has real prospects. So Avner said to David, Akuma ve'elecha ve'akbitzoel Adoni HaMelech es kol Yisrael. I will get up, I will stand tall, and I will go and together and round up all of the leaders of Israel, vayichrusu itcha, and they will all make a covenant and agreement with you. And you will be the king b'chol asher taveh nafshecha, over all the people that you desire to lead. Vayishlach David es Avner v'elech b'shalom. Avner agreed to do that, and David said, okay, go ahead on your mission, bring them all here, and I will be king over all of them, and he left in peace. V'nei avdei David v'Yoav ba mehagidut. At this time, Yoav, who, remember, was the one who had that skirmish with Avner, during which Yoav's brother was killed by Avner, Yoav, who was the head of David's armies, was out with his army on some sort of a military mission of some sort. Vishalol Rav Imam, they had obviously conquered something somewhere. It does not specify who. I guess it's not important for the story. Vishalol Rav Imam Heviu, and they were bringing a lot of booty that they had, a lot of plunder that they had conquered. Avner einenu im David b'Chebron, and by this point, Avner was no longer with David in Hebron, because David had sent him on his way, on his mission, and he left peacefully. And Yoav and the entire army that was with him came, and it was told to Yoav, saying, Ba Avner ben Ner el HaMelech. Avner ben Ner came to the king, and he sent him out, and he went out peacefully. Vayavo Yoav el HaMelech. So Yoav came to the king and said, Vayomer, Me'asisa, what have you done? Hineva Avner elecha. Lama zeh shilachto v'elechaloch. Avner came to you. You had him in your hands. He's our enemy. He's the head of our enemy. You could have had him, at least imprisoned him. You could have hung him. You could have held on to him. Why did you just let him go like that? Vayadata es Avner ben Ner. Don't you know Avner ben Ner? You know him. He's a sneaky guy. He's here to kind of sneak. He's here to trick you. He's not being honest. He doesn't mean it. And remember, the the words of the Navi here were clear to tell us that Avner was not trying to trick, that Avner was actually genuine. But Yoav isn't willing to even allow for that possibility, and he therefore says he certainly came to trick you. How could you trust him? He came to scout you out, to check out what your weaknesses are, what your strengths are, to check out the city. He wanted to know what you're doing when you go here, when you go there, what your patterns are like, so he can exploit your weaknesses. Yoav me'im David, and Yoav left David. Remember, it doesn't say here what David's response was. David didn't respond and say, no, you're wrong. And he didn't, rather, David, but it just says that Yoav left. One gets the impression that David disagreed with Yoav, but didn't exactly instruct him as to what to or what not to do. Vayishlach malachim achrei Avner. And so then Yoav, after he left David, he sent messengers after Avner, Vayashivu oso mibar hasira, v'David lo yada. And they brought him back from the bar, the cistern at Sirah. So in other words, they caught up to him. They brought him back, and David did not know. Obviously, Yoav was afraid that if David would know that they had Avner, David would want to treat him properly, because David had already demonstrated that he wanted to make peace with him. Vayashav Avner Chevron. Avner, not knowing that there was this enmity, that there was this disagreement between Yoav and David, all Avner knew was that this peace pact was being drawn up, that David had sent him out to bring all of Israel together. And for all he knows, Yoav is bringing him back to continue and further those discussions. So when he brings Avner comes back Hebron without a fight. Vayateu Yoav al toch hashar, and Yoav took him into the gate. In other words, to have a discussion with him, daber ito basheli, to talk with him in private. Vayakeu sham hachomesh, and he struck him. He stabbed him in the belly. Vayamas b'dam Asoel achiv, and he died in revenge for killing Asoel, who was the brother of Yoav. So Yoav here, through his anger and through his unwillingness to give Avner a chance, and through his this entire peace accord just fell apart because he was suspicious. We certainly understand his suspicion, and we certainly understand his hatred and desire for revenge over the death of his brother. However, Yoav here showed that he was simply unwilling to let go of that desire for vengeance, and thus the potential for peace just fell apart. Vayishma David me'achari Cain, and David heard this afterwards. Vayomer, and he said, Naki anochi umamlachti me'im Adonai Adolam. I and my kingdom, I am innocent before God forever. Midmei Avner ben Ner, over the death of Avner ben Ner. David declared and made it very clear, I had nothing to do with this. I did not want. So David wanted, in order to bring David, of course, wanted to unite the kingdom. David knew it was his destiny, as had been foretold by Shmuel, to be the king over the united kingdom. David wanted it to be clear that he did not want this accomplished by killing off Avner ben Ner, killing off his enemies. He wanted this accomplished by making peace with them. Yachulu al Rosh Yoav. May the guilt, the responsibility for the death of Avner be upon the head of Yoav el kol beis aviv, and on his entire family. And why did he blame his family? Apparently the family was stoking this desire for vengeance over the death of one of their own, Asoel, and also were unwilling to allow for a potential peace. And David here cursed the house of Yoav. There should always be in the house of Yoav Zavu Mitzora. Zav is a person that is sick with discharges, with painful discharges from their genitals. Umitzora, and this is quite a curse that in their family there's always going to be a Zav, there's always going to be a Mitzora, a leper. Umachazik bapelach, and a person who holds the bapelach is something they use like a crutch. A person is always going to be a cripple, v'nofel b'cherev, and those that are fallen and killed in swords, v'chasar lechem, and people that are poor so that they don't have bread. So he he cursed them with having cripples in the family, with having soldiers dying at war in the family, with having illnesses and all sorts of terrible things. V'Yoav Avishai Achiv, and Yoav Avishai Achiv, and his brother Avishai Hargula Avner. They are the ones that killed Avner. Before, we did not learn that Avishai was involved in killing Avner. We just knew that it was Yoav, but apparently Avishai helped in the murder. In revenge for his killing of Asahel that had happened during the war in Givon. It kind of points out the difference between those deaths. Not that Avner's killing Asahel was necessarily a good thing, but it was in the context of a battle. When Avner killed Asahel, it was in the context of a battle, and it was in the context of where Asahel was chasing him, presumably to kill him, and it was in a context where the two sides had been fighting and had been killing each other. So Avner's killing of Asahel, while not being a good thing, was in the context of battle one level of killing which can be excused to some degree. However, this killing, there was no battle, there was nothing. It was purely for revenge, which makes therefore no moral equivalence between the two events. Vayomer David el Yoav el kol ha'ama sherito. David said to Yoav and to all of the soldiers that were with him, Kiru v'teichem. David wanted to make it extremely clear that he was not happy about this Avner. Now, a lot of conspiracy theorists might say, yeah, David really wanted him killed too. He just had him do it. He didn't want to make it look like it because he wants to unite the kingdom. He wants the people of Israel to like him, so he made it. He's making Yoav the fall guy. But no, David wanted to make it really clear. He says, tear your clothes, v'chigru sakim, and put on sackcloth, v'siftu livnei Avner, and I want you to lament, to cry before the body of Avner, mourn over his body. V'hamelech David holech acharim mitan. The king himself walked after the bed. In other words, again, to emphasize really strong that it was not David's desire for this death to take place. Vayikbru et Avner b'Chevron. They buried him in Chevron. Vayisoi hamelech et kolo. And the king cried really loud. Vayefk al kever Avner. And he cried over the grave of Avner. Vayivku chol am. And all the people cried because we had just lost this chance for peace. Vayikonein hamelech al Avner. And the king cried over Avner, and this is similar we saw before where the king cried over the death of Saul and Jonathan. Now he's crying over Avner. Again, we find this following poem, this following lament by Omar. And again, this is the second time we see David as a poet, David as one who writes songs. Again, this is a song of mourning, that different side of David that shows up, of course, most famously in Psalms. But here we have a little taste of his poetry and his prose. Hakemos Naval Yamus Avner. Should Avner have died the death of Naval? Remember, Naval was the lowlife, the idiot, the guy who was the opposite of Avner. Avner was trying to bring peace. He was trying to bring people together. He was trying to unite people, whereas Naval had no qualms about not giving people what they deserved, about causing divisions between people. Is it fair that Avner should die the same type of death that Naval died? Yodecha lo asuros. Your hands were not bound. Viraglecha lo lenechushtaim hugashu. And your feet were not placed in chains. Kinefol livnei b'nei avlon falta. But nonetheless, you fell in this in front by people that were treacherous, people that were bnei avla, people that were incorrect, people that were wrong, people that were evil, directing that at his own general Yoav. Vayosifu chalam livkos alav, and the people continued to cry over him and cry over him. Vayavo, in other words, you weren't even taken captive, but you were killed by the people that were aggressive and overly aggressive. Vayavo chalam lahavros es David lechem ba'od hayom, and the nation came to give David bread. This is a custom of mourning where the people bring food to the mourner. David actually sat in mourning. Again, it's emphasizing over and over and over again. David wants it to be extremely clear so that the conspiracy theorists can't say that David really wanted him dead. Vayishava David Lamar, and David swore as follows: Koyaseli Elohim b'cho Yosef, may God do this to me, and may God continue Kiyim lifnevo Hashemesh et hamlechem o kol me'uma, that I should taste any bread or any food at all. So David declared a fast. Here, you can't help but think about the contrast between this fast and Saul's fast. This fast is a fast at a time of mourning, a time of sadness, and David does not feel comfortable eating and feasting during a time of sadness, a time of mourning, a time of pain, as opposed to the fasts that Saul had declared, which were inappropriate at a time when people needed the strength to fight. And everyone recognized and realized, and it was good in their eyes. Everyone, and this nation, you get the idea that this includes the people of Israel. David's declaration, David's demonstration that he did not want this disunity, but he wanted unity among the people, that he did not want this murder, he did not want revenge, but he wanted cooperation. Everyone saw that, and they liked that. They saw this was a good quality of David. Just like everything and all of the people saw everything that David had done, and they approved of it. And all of the nation, meaning this sounds like the nation of Judah, and all of, or this could mean the soldiers, but it sounds more to me like it means the people of Judah, V'chol Yisrael, and the people of Israel saw on that day, they realized that it was not David's decree that Avner should be murdered. The king said to his servants, there was a great man, a great leader who died in Israel today. I am weak. Even though I am appointed king, I am weak. I am saddened by this tragedy. These sons of Tzeruya, meaning Yoav, and his brothers, they are more harsh. They are more, I've seen the translation savage. They are more vicious than I am. I'm a soft-hearted guy. I'm a softie. I'm a nice guy. I'm willing to trust. They're not. May God repay those that have done evil according to their evil. May God take vengeance. In other words, David is saying, I'm not going to take vengeance now against Yoav. May God be the one that takes that vengeance. This concludes chapter 3, and this is a tragic opportunity lost. The opportunity of bringing peace through peaceful means was lost because of vengeance, because of a lack of trust. And once again, one must wonder how history might have turned out differently had the people all united in a peaceful way. Would they have split in the future? These are things we will never know, but one can speculate. Unfortunately, we see this kind of pattern repeating itself over and over again, where people choose vengeance and distrust over trust and peace. Thank you so much for studying chapter 3 together. Looking forward to studying chapter 4 and, of course, the rest of this beautiful book of Shmuel.